各位观众朋友，大家好，欢迎收看《美国观察》，我是林森。首先来关注今天的重要新闻。俄罗斯入侵乌克兰近6个月，目前战事处于焦灼状态。乌克兰方面宣称已经在局部地区开始反攻。战争导致乌克兰粮食出口遭到封锁。俄罗斯占领的乌克兰扎波罗热核电站是乌克兰面临的2大威胁。联合国秘书长古特雷斯将在乌克兰西部城市利沃夫会见乌克兰总统泽连斯基以及土耳其总统埃尔多安。预计古特雷斯将讨论结束战争的政治解决方案、战争对于全球粮食供应的威胁，以及被俄罗斯军队占领的扎波热洛核电站的安全问题。该核电站是欧洲最大的核电站。扎波罗热核电站自今年3月以来一直被俄罗斯军队占领。俄罗斯和乌克兰相互指责对方炮轰该核电站。乌克兰于星期3在扎波罗热核电站进行了紧急救援演习，以应对可能发生的状况。古特雷斯表示，他希望在此次设立非军事区。目标转向白宫方面，根据美国 CDC， 也就是疾病防控中心统计，美国境内已经出现了13517起猴痘病例。随着疫情的逐渐的升温，白宫宣布，在公共卫生团队与白宫国安会共同商榷之后，下星期一再发180万剂猴痘的疫苗以及5万份治疗药物。公共卫生官员强调，在第2剂疫苗之后2周的防护力最高，呼吁民众不要掉以轻心。详细的情况，请美国之音白宫记者黄耀义来介绍。耀义。
根据美国 CDC 最新的数据显示呢，现在全世界在8月17号已经有超过了39000起的猴痘确诊病例，分配在94个国家当中。而在美国自己本身境内呢，49个州都有病例，再加上华盛顿特区以及波多黎各，那美国的平均病患的年龄是35岁。那么根据了这个美国卫生与公共服务部 HHS 在8月15号的资料显示，到目前为止呢，拜登政府已经派发了442000多剂的猴痘疫苗，这个 Genesio 的疫苗，也就是所谓的非复制性天花与猴痘活疫苗。那白宫在8月18号又表示说呢，在公共团队跟国安会共同商榷之后，将从下个星期一8月22号开始再加派180万剂的猴痘疫苗。美国 CDC 的主任瓦兰斯基在8月18号星期四的记者会上也强调呢，他告诉民众说，猴痘疫苗必须要接种2剂，而且要2剂之后才会发挥最强的防护力，所以呼吁大家千万不要掉以轻心。我们看一下瓦兰斯基怎么说。
We're learning how well these vaccines work against monkeypox and in this specific outbreak. Although we anticipate vaccines will provide protection, temporarily reducing or avoiding behaviors that increase your risk of monkeypox exposure is important, especially between your first and second doses of vaccine.
那拜登政府呢，预计要在2023年的年底之前呢，配送700万份的猴痘疫苗。此外呢，这个美国联邦食品药物管理局已经批准使用来治疗天花的药物，叫做 TPOXX， 可以拿来治疗猴痘，因为2者的病毒是类似的。那白宫也表示呢，从下星期一开始会配送5万份的 TPOXX 药物到全美的各地。我们来看一下白宫的猴痘疫情协调官芬顿怎么说。
Next week, HHS will be positioning 50,000 courses of TPOXX across the country. That's nearly 5 times as many treatment courses than confirmed cases in the U.S.
近似拜登总统也在推特上表示呢，他的政府正在确保美国民众能够轻松而且快速的获得猴痘的检测、疫苗还有治疗的药物。林森，
好，谢谢耀义，感谢美国之音记者黄耀义在白宫的连线报道。美国与台湾预计今年秋季开始进行一项新的贸易谈判，这项名为“美台21世纪贸易倡议”包含议程广泛。美台谈判双方对未来的谈判均有积极的评价。 美国贸易代表办公室星期三发表声明说，双方制定了强有力的议程，谈判议题包括贸易便捷化、良好的监管法规的实践、强有力的反贪腐标准、加强中小企业间的贸易、深化农业贸易、取消歧视性的贸易壁垒等。中国外交部星期四表示，北京将采取坚决措施捍卫其领土完整，并敦促美国不要做出错误的判断。中国商务部和国务院台湾办公室同一天也表示反对这一谈判计划。由美国牵头，包括韩国、台湾和日本的主要芯片制造商的芯片四方联盟的预备会议即将召开。韩国外交部长官星期四，也就是8月18日说，韩国预计将参加这个芯片四方联盟的预备会议。半导体是韩国的首要的出口物项，中国是韩国最大的贸易伙伴，而芯片设备等美国技术则是制造芯片的关键。韩国在美中两国都有重要的客户。首尔方面试图在美国和中国在半导体与芯片加工技术领域的竞争之间探路游走。根据韩国工商会星期三宣布的对韩国300家出口商所做的调查，53%的受访者说韩国应当加入美国主导的芯片集团，而41%的受访者认为韩国目前应当暂缓加入，5%的受访者反对韩国加入。美国总统拜登本月将芯片与科学法签署成为法律，该法案为芯片制造和研究提供520亿美元的补贴。中国商务部星期四说，中国反对美国新的芯片法案。美国上星期申请失业保险福利的人数略有减少，就业市场继续是美国经济最强劲的领域之一。美国劳工部星期四报告，在8月13日截止的这个星期，申请失业保险的人数是25万人，减少了2000人。上星期的数字经过修正，减少了1万人。失业保险救助4个星期的平均申请数量是24万6750人，减少了2750。领取传统失业救济的人数在8月6日截止的这个星期增加了7000人，达到了143万，也是4月初以来的最高水平。美国劳工部本月早些时候报告说，美国雇主7月份增加了52万8千份就业，是之前预报的2倍多。失业率下降到了3.5%，与2020年初新冠疫情席卷美国之前的50年来的最低点持平。美国经济今年上半年出现收缩，这是显示一次衰退已经开始的一个迹象，但就业市场的力量一直与经济衰退不符。高盛集团和野村证券星期四8月18日再次下调了中国今年经济增长的预期，理由是需求疲弱、动态清零防疫政策带来的不确定性、房地产行业萎靡不振以及最近的限电措施带来的冲击。美国知名投行高盛集团将中国2022年全年 GDP 增长的预期从之前的预期值3.3%下调至了3%，而日本券商野村证券则将中国的经济今年全年的成长预期从3.3%下调至了2.8%。高盛的经济学家列举出了中国7月新出炉的经济数据，以及近期由于高温干旱天气导致的供电不足，为他们下调中国经济成长预期的依据。7月份的数据显示，中国信贷急剧的萎缩，全国各省财政收入出现了巨额的赤字，社会消费持续低迷，官方预期的下半年经济全面好转似乎并不乐观。欢迎继续收看《美国观察》。华裔美籍作家邢立美以自己18岁来到台湾参加暑期项目学中文的经历为背景，写下了畅销小说《台北爱之船》。 讲述华裔青少年在台北的夏日恋情、文化体验以及身份认同的探索。台北爱之船已经改编成为电影，是第一部全程在台湾取景的好莱坞电影。
Indigo, your best-selling novel Love Boat Taipei is adapted into film and now in production phase. You were in Taipei with the filmmaking crew by the end of last year. Could you tell us how is the production going now? When could your fans expect to see it in theaters? And what are the highlights? And are there any differences comparing to the original novel?
Oh yeah, thank you for all the questions. So it's been a really exciting time. We cast for the film last year with Ross Butler as Rick Wu, Ashley Liao as our Ever Wong, Chelsea Zhang as Sophie Ha, and Nico Hiraga as Xavier Ye. Ashley actually was just cast in the new Hunger Games movie, so I'm so thrilled for her. I think that's one of the hopes I had when the movie, when I was talking with producers in Hollywood. It's like I really want these 30 different characters in the book to be on the screen and then go on to be discovered into other roles around Hollywood, because that's who we are. Like we play many kinds of roles as a community. So that has been just like, I think the most recent highlight. I'm like so happy for Ashley. And then yes, we were filming in Taiwan from like November to mid-January. And that was just a magical experience. Really incredible bonding time with the cast and crew. And I think we had lots of postings all over social media of us going clubbing. And I can't wait to share more of the stories and then share the film with the world.
What are your expectations for the movie? Are the audiences going to be more like young adults, or do you expect to have a wider audiences?
Yeah, so I am so thrilled at the reception that the book has gotten. I had, readers, 15-year-old girls were reading the book with their 90-year-old grandmothers. And I think that was just a really unexpected opportunity to bridge across cultures that I didn't expect. And to hear like different generations, different cultural generations have been able to like find themselves in the book. Like the grown-ups find themselves in the parents, but they also find themselves in these youth that are, some of them had those experiences, some of them went on Love Boat. I have readership across all ethnicities, and I think for many, many years, that's why there were so many years between Crazy Rich Asians and Joy Luck Club, is people are like, well, are we going to have an audience for a movie? A movie is very expensive to make. And I think Crazy Rich Asians helped to break that mold and show like, no, there is an audience. People are hungry for diverse shows. And same with Shondaland's work, Hamilton, also like diverse cast, but general audience, and Love Boat Taipei. I feel like it's all Asian American cast, but again, a general audience. And so that's really exciting. And the most important thing I think to just vote with our dollars and just show like, we buy the books, we watch the movies.
The main character Ever grew up in Ohio, got into medical school, and as her parents expected, but deep inside she wants to dance. She was reluctant going to Taiwan for the program 海外青年暑期返国研习团 at 健谈, nicknamed Love Boat, to learn Mandarin at first. But later she found out some fun and got into some sort of complicated relationships. Could you tell us how much does Ever resemble to you? And could you also tell us what kind of forbidden things or adventurous things that did you do when you were in the Love Boat program?
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar with the Love Boat program, it's been around since the 1960s. It was started by the Taiwanese government to bring overseas Chinese youth to learn Mandarin and culture. And I was invited by the government to come I was a presidential scholar in high school, so everyone with a Chinese last name would get this trip for free. So I showed up not realizing that it was actually this notorious love boat where kids actually they fall in love, they find relationships. There are marriages that came out of Love Boat. My husband actually also went on Love Boat, although a different summer than me. So those are some of the similarities that bore out. Like the stories that I say that like Ever's internal journey, this like desire to be an artist, even though she was on this other path, that was a more traditional path that her parents wanted for her, that is more my journey. I went into law and finance, those are more traditional paths. But I secretly was writing on the side for many years. And it took me many, many years to have the courage to call myself a writer and to have the courage even to tell my family that I was doing it. And then as for the fun stuff on Love Boat, I definitely took glamour shots, but they were not naked ones. But I did see other people's naked shots. My husband actually sneaked out clubbing over the blue pipe, so that's where I got that story. I didn't even know there was this blue pipe that stretched across the Keelung River. So he and his friends climbed up like some service ladder, went out across the catwalk. And so in the book, my characters almost fall into the water. But I and my friends, we just actually snuck out the front door. And so I also have like scenes like that. We did a lot of dancing, and that's actually where I realized, oh, I really love to dance. That's probably why I enjoy going out clubbing so much. And it tied into the theme of Ever being a dancer herself. And then, of course, going to the night markets and the tour around the island, and just experiencing that, like this is my heritage. This is my family's culture. Like all that, it was me.
In the novel, there are Asian Americans from different parts of the country all gathering in Taipei. Some of them come from places like Manhattan or LA that has a lot of Asian Americans, as the character mentions. And there is Ever, who comes from Ohio, that think of herself more as an American but barely Asian. Her friend teases her as Twinkie. Do you think different geographic locations affect how Asian Americans see their own identity? And is it even more difficult to reconcile with the identity if growing up in a place like Ohio?
Yeah, I think it is actually quite different. I didn't really appreciate this until I went to Harvard, and my college roommate was from Los Angeles, and I grew up in Ohio. I think, so my experience in Ohio is that I was very conscious of being Asian American because people were always asking me, what are you? And actually when I was little, someone said I was Black. They said that I was officially Black, like categorized by the school system. They said, my mom's on the school board, you're Black. And I remember being really confused by this because I'm like, I don't think I'm Black, and just trying to figure out like, then who am I, right? And so I think because there was only one of me, I had to grapple with my identity. And I really related actually to Beauty and the Beast, where Bella just feels really out of place in this small town that she's growing up in. And I didn't realize until I left Ohio that the reason I was so out of place was we were immigrants there. And I didn't have roots there, and I came from a different culture. But because I grew up there, I also absorbed the American culture. Whereas my college roommate from Los Angeles grew up with all kinds of Asian Americans, and she knew all the differences among the different Asians. She wrote her senior thesis on the Chinatown Asians because they were different than her experience growing up in the suburbs. So she didn't have the same sense of, I think, isolation that I felt, and like I had a lot of, I was teased a lot. I did go through some bullying, and so she didn't have those experiences either. And so I learned a lot from like kind of that more, I think, healthy perspective that she brought to her sense of Asian identity, and then I think in her turn she learned about like that experience of being marginalized from me, and we've worked together on various issues over time.
The characters also talk about racism they have encountered in the US. For example, schoolmate pulling eyes, making everyone wants to have bigger eyes, or passersby yelling, "Go back to China," and the father chose not to respond. During the pandemic, we can see that hate crimes aiming at Asian were rising. How do you see the racism that Asian American faces in the US nowadays?
So I definitely grew up with racism, but I didn't know it was racism. Like I remember my mom actually tried to talk to my fourth grade teacher and to tell him like that I was really facing a lot of persecution actually at the time. And the teacher's like, kids are kids, they just bully each other. And I think it went beyond that. So people would speak made up languages at me, or like as I got older, people would say, "Oh, you're like a porcelain doll," which I think I included in the book. And then, of course, like as an Asian American female, I was both sexualized and also considered androgynous. Like I remember overhearing a conversation at work where they were talking about interracial dating right in front of me, and someone said, "Well, would you ever date someone of another race?" And everyone was Caucasian except for me, and they're like, "No, just not attracted to them." And I remember I internalized those things. Like thinking, "Oh, I'm not an attractive person. I'm not." Someone who's lovable, right? And like I always felt there was a distance between me and a lot of people, and I didn't know why. But I think over time, as I would hear like when I went to Harvard, when I went to places like Love Boat, and realized that this is actually a common experience. It's not just me. That was very healing. And I do feel like China becoming stronger economically and more respectable economically has been beneficial. I remember there were times when we go shopping when I was younger in Europe, and we wouldn't. People wouldn't expect us to be able to afford anything. And then like now when I go shopping in Europe, people expect that I'm like a crazy rich Asian, right? And so that's actually a positive change that's been impacted by changes in, in our relationship with China. But then you're right, like with the pandemic, that kind of reversed itself. And then, there's a lot of blame directed towards our community. And it has been really, really sad to just see these random acts of violence against Asian Americans, and so in some ways, we are almost worse off in the sense that there's more violent behavior, and it's very blatant, and politicians sometimes feel like it's okay to say these things, whereas I think before it was a little bit more hidden and a little bit more in check, like, yeah, we're racist, but we know we're not supposed to be, or like we're trying not to be, right? And I feel like now, like, some of those people are just tired. I think people are just tired from pandemic and frustrated and angry, and once again, I think it's easy to scapegoat people, and some of that falls on our community.
In the novel, Ever has a tiger mom, and her father seems more supportive, and in the end, he even chose the path that he wanted, probably encouraged by Ever. How real is the stereotype for Asian families like a tiger mom and a cat dad? And you got a lot of great academic accomplishments with degrees from top colleges. Is it part of the result of the great parenting job of your mom and your dad, plus your own efforts, of course?
I didn't actually know anything about Harvard when I was growing up. I didn't know about colleges. Like, my parents were immigrants, and actually my mom's father, he cannibalized his college funds. He took his college funds and went to the Philippines and started a business. So in some ways, my family's inverted. Like, they're a little bit anti-intellectual, and they're like, we made the money based on our hard work and being clever in the marketplace. But my mom actually was one of the more educated ones in her family. She went and got her teaching degree. So maybe, that probably is some of the values that I absorbed. Like, we would do summer school with mom when I was growing up, and we really enjoyed that because that included like extra lessons, but also like cooking classes. We'd make eggs together and other things. But I don't actually think I really had tiger parents in the traditional sense, partly because of the way my mom grew up. And then my dad is also, he came to the United States when he was 13, and basically had to, he was living with his sisters, so he's being raised by his sisters who are not much older than him, and just having to make his own way in the world. So he went to the University of Michigan, did very well. So he may have been slightly more like, he would challenge me on math facts, or, just kind of teach me things like that. But he didn't like push me really hard. Ever does have tiger parents, and I think that is a very common stereotype in the community. But what my Italian editor said is like, she really related to this family too. And I think what I realized living in Silicon Valley now is that high-performing family is really, it's not an Asian family, it's a high-performing family. And so many of second-generation Asian Americans, the only way they could come to the United States was if their parents were, like they got some kind of university student visa, or they were a high-tech worker, H-1B visas. And so really the only ones who could come were already high-performing families. And it doesn't mean that we don't have other immigrants. There were definitely other waves of immigrants, like the Chinese who built the railroads, the paper sons, and there are others. But there is a wave of immigrants that are kind of the intellectual class. And so within those families, yes, you do see very high standards for academics because that was the path to success. But there are, so many other Asian American families that aren't that way.
Are you a tiger mom for your boys? How would you describe your own parenting style?
I didn't think I was a tiger mom, but I think my kids think I am, so they're probably right. We have these gifts, these talents, these abilities, these perspectives on the world, like just the privileges that we're born into. Even being like Asian American, that's a privilege in so many ways, to be at the intersection of two cultures and maybe even more. And so I feel like our job is to be a steward of those talents in a way that we can benefit the world. And so I think that's what I hope to impart to my children. Let's figure out what is it that you love, and be a good steward of those resources that you have.
You're a leader in the AI field. Do you think Asian Americans could find opportunities to prosper in this field?
It's a really fascinating field. I really think that our future is already being shaped by artificial intelligence technology. It's already in our homes, it's in our iPhones, it's in our home devices and our cars even. I think Chinese Americans are doing very well in the field. Like, there's a lot of folks moving in. It's a field that I think is thinking a lot about social questions because it's embedded in technology. So implicit bias, there have been iconic headlines that came out with like a human resources algorithm that wasn't correlating women with leadership roles. And so I think there's just really heightened attention being paid to like, okay, does this algorithm work on dark skin the same way it works on lighter skin? And so that is like, I think, a reason why we need more diverse people in the field, and we are seeing more and more diverse voices. We need more. I think China is actually, they've put a lot of money into research. They've labs, they have AI cities that we don't have in the United States. And it wasn't until very recently that we even had the type of federal funding that we have now, but it's not enough to keep up. But fortunately, we have a very robust private sector in Silicon Valley, and they are, they're doing incredible things there.
Any specific suggestions you would have for Asian Americans pursuing this field, especially girls that are interested in tech or AI?
So I'm a part of this women's engineering WhatsApp group, right? And everyone's always chattering. They share information that's really helpful, like here's how you negotiate for a raise, or what's a realistic salary at this level, and how do you break in if you're trying to switch like your field within the profession, and just really valuable network. So I think make friends, network with each other, continue to build your capacity, just take classes. There's a lot of amazing online courses out there. It's such a rapidly evolving field that your knowledge gets dated very quickly, so you kind of just want to keep on top of that, but also have confidence, like you know what you're doing. I think that's a lot of times girls count themselves out because they think they need to be perfect at it, and that was like a flaw in our upbringing. For many years, girls thought we had to be perfect, and if you weren't perfect, then you were like, well, someone else should do it, they're better qualified than me. But the truth is, no one's perfect. No one knows what they're doing in this rapidly evolving field, and so, you with all your intelligence and your creativity and your ability to like problem solve, like all those things, you'll just bring to the equation, and it's not going to be perfect, but that's part of the process. So to stick with it, I guess, is a big part of it.
乌克兰国民警卫队防空部队近日执行了一项不寻常的任务，就是用高射炮打击地面部队。这型苏联时期的 ZU-23-2 牵引式的双管高射炮于1960年代服役。在91年海湾战争和第一次利比亚内战中，该型的高射炮均被用来打击地面人员或者是装甲车。
Я служу у протиповітряній обороні, але сьогодні перед нами було поставлено нетипове завдання для протиповітряної оборони – відпрацювати по скупченню живої сили противника, чим ми сьогодні вранці, власне кажучи, і зайнялися. Провели розрахунки, вирахували азимут, вирахували кут нахилу стволів і ввели вогонь. Виїжджали на позицію, швидко розгорнулися, відпрацювали, згорнулися та поїхали, щоб не наражати себе, особовий склад на небезпеку.
纽约中央公园的沙地游乐场上放置了一座真人大小的普京的坐姿的塑像，他身下是一辆缩小版的坦克。孩子们对这件雕塑嬉戏，游人出于好奇也前来打卡。
Actually, I think it's a good way to express one's opinion and show the world that there are a lot of people out there who are not happy about what's happening.
好，今天美国观察的全部内容就是这些，感谢您的收看，我们下次节目再见。